Hello, everyone. Welcome to my DBT series. In today's walkthrough, I am going to be demoing to you how to build your first DBT project from start to finish. Now, in this demo, I will explain sources, how to reference your source data, how to reference your models downstream, YAML files for documentations, materializations, testing, how to implement quality tests for your data sources and for your data models. For this demo, I am going to be using the Look E-commerce dataset, and I'm going to include that dataset in the description so that you can join me in this walkthrough. So let's get started.
The first thing we're going to do is to start creating our models. We're going to be working with the dataset, the Look e-commerce BigQuery dataset. It is a public dataset that is available on BigQuery. I'm going to leave the link to the dataset on the description so that you can follow along with this demo. The first thing we're going to do is to create a staging folder. So I'm just going to quickly create one, new folder, staging. Now in my staging directory, we're going to create our first model. For this demo, we're going to be using three data sets, the users table, the products table, and the other items table. So I'm going to quickly create our first model. Now I want you to remember something I said in the beginning, that DBT models are simply SQL scripts. So to do that, we're going to create a new file. In DBT, it is best practice that when you're creating your model name, you don't just put the name of the model. For example, this is going to be in the staging directory, so I'm going to do staging underscore. And because the dataset I'm going to be using is the Look e-commerce dataset, I would not want to just put users. If I were to put just users, there is a chance that another dataset or another source data we're going to be using might have the same name users. So we're going to have a conflict having staging users. However, I would like to use this first before I then include my users at the end. So I'm just going to quickly have ecoms because the name is quite long. Excuse me. Because the name is quite long, I'm going to use a short form for this name. So I'm going to call it ecoms underscore users dot sql. Right. So I'm going to quickly write the select script. This is selecting everything from the users table. Now I'm just going to preview this, but before I preview it, let me confirm that we have our data source correct and then the user. So this is BigQuery public data, the look e-commerce users. I'm going to save this. And if you noticed, you can see that we already have a lineage showing up here. I'm just going to preview. Perfect. In your staging models, this is the place you want to perform very light transformations. This can include formatting your data type, rounding figures that have stuff like maybe so many decimals, reducing the number of decimals, changing the name of certain fields, basically anything that you would or however you would love your data to come in. This is the place where you perform those light transformations. But keep in mind, you must not do joins or aggregations in your staging model. So this is something you should keep in mind. So quickly, we're going to flesh out all the columns we have in this model. We have successfully built out our first model. Now let's build all three models that we need in our staging directory. So we have the first one. I'm just going to quickly create the second. I'll just copy this as a base so that I don't have to write so much. Now, just like I mentioned before, it is best practice to flesh out all the fields you have in your model, especially in your staging directory or your staging model. You need to flesh out all of them and perform any light transformation that is required. For example, we have ID, we have other ID. If you look at this place like created at, shipped at, delivered at, returned at, and price, this looks like it will need some transformation. So I'm just going to quickly do that so that will come from. Okay, let's just confirm that we have everything. We have the order ID, user ID, product ID, inventory, item ID. I have this repeating. Then we have the status, which I renamed to other status. We have created at, we have shipped at, we have delivered at, returned at, sale price. Yep, I think this is good to go. I'm just going to save it. Perfect. Okay, moving on to the last staging model. quickly. Just gonna create four products. Okay, I'm just going to come here again and copy this as a base. So this is products. I'm going to rename. So I'm just fleshing out just like before. I have to quickly do this. Cost, and then I'm going to transform cost. I would like it to be in four decimal places instead. So I am done fleshing this out. I am going to save now and preview. So something you should be aware of is previewing is fine, but you can also compile. So compiling kind of compiles this for you against your data warehouse such that you can even copy it and say run it on your data warehouse like BigQuery or Snowflake. I'm just going to preview. Perfect. Now let's talk about sources. We have successfully created our three staging models. And if you notice in all the models, we have the database, the schema, and the table all locked in this models. But something, one of the things that DBT provides is a source macro. A source macro is basically a macro that helps you to be able to reference your sources without having to hard code the name of your source in your model. So to do that, I'm going to quickly teach you how we can get that done. And then something else you should also be aware of is that your staging models should be one to your source. It is really important that you don't have one staging model referencing two sources. You have one staging model referencing just one source. So we're going to create a file in our staging directory for our sources. New file. Now I like to put an underscore. This helps your source to show up at the beginning. So this is the name of my source. This is the name of my table. And then I did underscore ser, that's the source, and then YAML file. Don't forget the extension is YAML. So create. Perfect. Once you do this, what you want to do is DBT provides a shortcut that can help you to quickly get started with your source YAML file. So I'm going to do underscore underscore source. Voila. So we have this for us. Okay, so look at the name here stands for the name of your source. For us, we know that our database is BigQuery public data, our schema is TheLook E-commerce, and then our tables, we have three different tables. So I'm going to give my source a name. I'm going to give it a comps, and then underneath, I'm going to database. Our database is BigQuery public. data, and then the schema is this right here. I'm going to copy them. Then our tables, we have three different tables, right? So let's quickly update them. We have users, we have the products, we have other items, other items. All right, I'm just going to refresh so that I can see my lineage here. Perfect. So we can see that DBT is now showing our sources, the three sources we have for this project, the other items, the products, and the users. Now, what we want to do is we want to reference, instead of hard coding, we're now going to reference these sources that we have right here. So let's go to our models and reference all of them, starting from the users. So I'm going to, for a start, comment this out. Just going to comment this out. And I'm going to say from. Now, DBT also provides a shortcut for referencing your model. So I'm just going to do it in underscore underscore source. Now, the source name here is the name we saw when we, or rather the name that we gave our source. That is this ecom. Just going to copy and come here. I'm going to put that here as my source. And then this is the actual table we are referencing. So this is users. I'm going to save. And then I would like us to see our lineage. Perfect. Now we can see that our model is referencing our source. So we're going to do the same thing for all the other models that we've created. Let's quickly, I'm just going to copy this as a reference. And I'm going to refresh. Products. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now we have successfully created our staging models, and then we have also explained the concept of sources. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is YAML files. Now, DBT relies on two primary files, your SQL files and your YAML files. Now, SQL files are written to transform your data, whereas YAML files are human readable, and it is something that we use to create like a documentation on the models we've written, the field of the models, what the business logic behind the model is. So I'm going to quickly create a new file in our staging directory and call that file underscore staging underscore TheLook. Perfect. Okay, we have created the YAML file for our staging directory. Now, it is also best practice that each subdirectory you create has a YAML file. Of course, you can put the YAML file elsewhere. DBT provides packages that could be used to quickly create your YAML file. However, for this particular demo, I'm just going to copy directly from the DBT website what the YAML file looks like. And then in the next demo, I'm going to show how to use packages to be able to make your workflow really, really easy and faster. So I'm just going to copy this, and then we can start with listing out all the models we have and the columns and fields in them. So the first model we have is this. I'm just going to copy the name because I wouldn't want to write it incorrectly. Okay. Now, when filling out your model's YAML file, it is actually really important that you fill out your description because your description is used in your documentation. Now, think of moments where someone new joins your team and the person needs to go through, or the person needs to get up to speed with what everyone is doing. One of the things that can really help the person is documentations like this, and DBT relies on this YAML file to create documentation. And of course, now we're still in the staging layer of this demo, so we don't have so much transformations going on. But think of when we've got into like marts, or when we've built like intermediate tables where we have business logics being applied. Now this is a perfect place to write the description of some of the business logic, or basically what the model is. So I'm just going to copy this because this already has like a test and all of that, but we're going to come to that. So I'm just going to copy this and duplicate so that I can do the same thing for all the models that we've created. That's this, this. And oh, it's really important to know that um, YAML files deal with hierarchy loads, so it's really important that you are careful when creating your YAML files so you don't have like an error. But perhaps you have one, you can always click on this to format your YAML file. So let's do the next one for the last. Perfect. Okay, so we have other items. Let's create for products. Copy name, and then let's create for users. Copy name. Perfect. Okay, now let's start fleshing out other things that we need in the model. So for the start, we have other items. The description is staging model for other items. And then some of the columns we need is ID. We have an ID column. Now the ID column is a unique identifier for all others. Okay. Now this is the point where I should probably start talking about tests in DBT. Test is one of the ways that we are able to test our data in DBT. And it is really important because it helps us to be able to understand, to be able to test the quality of data we're getting and even the quality of data we're going to be passing downstream. There are two types of tests in DBT. We have the generic test, and then we also have the custom, also known as singular test. The generic test is inbuilt test that DBT has put in so that we can be able to test our columns, our fields, and test for unique, not null, accepted values, for referential integrity. These are generic tests that DBT has put in place. However, custom tests are tests that are basically built to test business models. We're going to have one or two singular tests sometime in this model, but for now, we're just going to implement a lot of generic tests for our fields. So let's just get started. Okay, so for this field, this is our unique identifier for all fields, which means it's a primary key. And of course, you know that primary keys are typically not null and unique. So the next one I want to do is other ID. Other ID. Um, other ID, just gonna ID for other. Okay. Then I can also include a test for it. Okay, what test do I want to include? I could say not null. Okay, not null. And I could just, I don't have, so I could just do more, just include a few more fields. Say I'm going to include your user ID, description. Okay, cool. So I've listed out just a few columns. You can list as many as you want. We have the ID, we have the ID, we have the other ID, we have the user ID, and then I implemented a test for the ID where I said is a unique identifier for all others. And then the data test that I put for it, it is not null, it is unique because it's the primary key. And then for other ID, that is the ID for an order. I put a test for it, it is not null. And then we have the next field, we have user ID field. So this is basically a foreign key that references the user ID from the users table. All right, let's move on to the next model. We have staging e-com products. So this is the staging model for products. Okay, and then the primary key for this is the product ID. So I'm just going to product, product ID, and then it is the unique identifier for all products. For all products. Okay, so I would like to also implement a test for it. If you recall, I copied the formatting from DBT configuration. So they already have like a few tests implemented here. But if there's anyone I don't think is necessary for this particular project, I'm just going to take it off. Okay, so for our product ID, which is the unique identifier for all products, it is the primary key, and then we all know that primary keys are not null and unique. The next one I would want to include is let me see. Let's go to our products model. Okay, category brand. I think I'll just leave it there for now. I'm just going to include this only. That's for me. So if we just take this off, perfect. Okay, then we'll go to the last model. That is our staging e-commerce users. So we have staging model for users table. Cool. All right, so let's see a few of the fields that we're going to be testing for. So the first one we're going to be testing for is the user ID, and then we know that it is the unique identifier for users, and I'm just going to implement two tests, not null and unique. The next one I want to do is I want to test for email. So we have email in our users, like each user basically have an email. So I'm just going to write the description here and say email address for our users. Now, something I am not 100% sure about is if every user that have registered with this company, if they imputed their email address. So I'm not going to implement a test for email, but let's move on. I'll probably implement a test for other fields. So we're going to look at age. Again, we don't have to list all of these. So for age, we have description as age of users. Now let's look at something more interesting, gender. Now our gender field has two records. M and F. M for male, F for female. So what we want to do now is I'm going to implement a test that is going to ensure that we don't have any other record other than M and F coming into our data. So perhaps we have something like S come up. DBT is going to alert us that all these data tests failed because we have this, that. So I'm going to quickly do that. Introduction. I'm going to say gender. Gender, yeah, of customers. Perfect. I'm going to pull a test. I'm just going to backspace because, like I said, it is very, very hierarchy dependent. So cool. Then I'm going to implement. I'm going to implement one more. I'm going to say traffic source. So let's look at this e-commerce users. So we have traffic source, and traffic source have specific sources or acquisition sources that our customers most likely would have come from. So I'm just going to implement a test for it as well. Okay. So for this one, we could have so many acquisition sources like search, organic, email, Facebook, display. So I am just going to quickly fill that up now. Search. Perfect. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about DBT functions materializing our models. But before I talk about that, let's quickly talk about tests that can be implemented for for our data sources. So let's go back to our source YAML file. Now in our source YAML file, you can see that we have three data tables, and you can also implement tests here as well, just as we did for individual models. So for the models, you can see that the models are directly or the exact same way they came from the source, except from light transformations that we did. That's for things that we would want to appear in a different format. So you can also implement tests here as well. And then one other test that is really important for implementation here in the source is source freshness. Source freshness basically helps to ensure that you are not working on stale data. It is a test you can implement and include the duration that you want to ensure that your data is fresh or within a time period. However, I'm not going to implement it for this project simply because I am not 100% sure how often this data set is being updated because it's a public data set. So that is the only reason why I'm not going to implement it. All right, moving on, let's talk about materialization. So going to our models, um, there are different ways you can specify how you want your data to be materialized in your data warehouse. And there are different formats also that your data can be materialized. Your data can be materialized as a view, it can be materialized as a table, etc. But it is best practice that your staging model is materialized as a view. This is because your data would always be updated. And say you have intermediate models that are feeding from your staging data, you want to ensure that those staging models, sorry, those intermediate models always get the latest value from your staging models. So that is why it is best that you materialize your staging models as a view. Now, one quick way to specify how you want your model materialized is using the config. So I'm just going to show you here, go all the way up, and then I'm going to do underscore config. Yeah. So it basically shows you this config block, and then you can now quickly put anyone you want. Like say I want this to be materialized as a view, I can put view here and save. So when we run this model, it's going to be materialized as a view in our data warehouse. However, another way to configure this is doing it at the global level. That is materializing it in your DBT project YAML file. So, and that is something that I always like to do for my model. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to just save this. Then I'm going to come here, liberty. So if you see here, we have eight projects, which is the project directory I'm working on. Then we have our staging models set to materialize as a view. I'm going to talk very in depth on this um, in our next series. But for now, I'm just going to talk about how to build your model. So let's go back to our models again. All right, building your models. One quick way to build a model is by using the build function here in DBT Cloud. And but if you're using the CLI or even if you're using the cloud and you would rather, write in the functions, you can quickly just write DBT build, select. This is selecting the specific model and then running it. But let's talk about three functions. We have DBT run, we have DBT build, and then we have DBT test. DBT run would only run your model and materialize it. DBT test would only test the model. So specific test, if you've selected a specific test, is going to select only that test and run it. However, if you run DBT build and you select, and if you run DBT build and then you also select say a model, it's going to first of all run DBT build and run your model, and then afterwards it's now going to run the test that you have implemented in your model as well. Moving forward, we're going to quickly build our model. So I'm just going to take this out for now, and I'm just going to build. So showing you with this. So if you see here, we have you can build downstream, you can build your upstream, you can build all of this. So I'm just going to build model. Perfect. So like I said, your DBT build not only builds your model, it also tests your model. So if you see all the tests that we've implemented, they all passed. This is great. So let's move on to the other models that we've done as well. So let's go to other items. And I'm just going to quickly build. Okay, so now we need to quickly know why our model failed. Okay, so you see that our model failed because we missed our commerce. So I'm just going to quickly put that here. Interesting stuff. I'm just going to quickly put that. And just to be sure that we have everything created at, shipped at, delivered at, returned at, and I'm going to just build again. Let's take this up. Still missing a comma. Okay, upon that, I'm going to save and build again. Perfect. I like that we actually had an error so that you could also see how to debug, perhaps if you had an issue. You saw how I was able to open it up and then read the logs that were sent to us. Okay, so you can see that it is materialized in my schema and it is materialized as a view. And then I think I mentioned this before. As a DBT developer, you have your schema only to yourself. Doing development, you have your schema to yourself. Okay, finally, we're going to build our last model. And I'm just going to write this one out, dbt build select, and then you can copy your model name. Copy name. So we have DBT build, select this specific model, and then let's build it. I just want to check that we are not missing a comma. I don't think we are. So build it. Perfect. We have successfully built our staging models and all our tests as well. They all passed. This is great actually. So we're going to quickly go over to start building and fleshing out the rest of our project. Let's get started.
We're done creating our models for this our staging models. We are going to move over to our intermediate models. I created a folder, and in this folder we're going to create all our intermediate models. Now something I quickly need to touch on, which I have actually spoken about before, is modularity. And I said that in data modeling we apply modular thinking. That is, instead of creating a huge chunk of code that might be more difficult to read, we could actually break down that code into chunks that could now be assembled together. Now that simply is modular thinking. So now we have our our basic units or our building blocks, which is our staging models, and I'm going to build our intermediate models, which can now flow to our marts. In our marts we could find like our facts tables or our dimension table. So quickly we're going to create our first model. The first model I'm going to create will be the other items aggregate. I'm going to create a file here, a new file, and I'm going to say int, or I'm just going to say aggregated. Yeah, great. Now something else I need to talk on here is when creating your models, just like we did referencing where we had to reference the sources. Now we're not going to be referencing our sources, rather we're going to be referencing the staging models that we've created. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that. What we're going to do is select, just to show you how we can select or reference our staging models. We're going to do a select, and we're going to do select asterisk from the first model I want us to reference is our other items. So we're going to do underscore underscore ref. If you remember, we did sources, but that one is only when you're referencing sources. But in your intermediate models, you're not supposed to reference sources because your sources is supposed to be referenced in your staging models. So now we're just going to copy the name of that model and put it here. Really important, when you're pasting the name of the model, don't do .sql, just the name of the model. So I'm to reference this right here. I'm going to copy the name and then I'm going to paste here. Cool. So this is basically what we want to do. And then I need to start building out our model. So here we're going to join the both of them together. So we have other items. I'm just going to change this to items. Now the other items as OI. Now we're going to do a left join products on, I'm just going to give products B on OI dot product ID is equal to P dot products ID. Cool. All right, then we are going to list out the aggregate. So what I want to do for this specific model is I want to get the date the order was created, the number of orders that was made by the user, the revenue, and the order margin. So I'm just going to quickly create that. We're going to start with order ID because this is going to be on the granularity is going to be order ID, and then we're going to have user ID, going to have minimum date created at as created at. Then we're going to have a count of other ID as other count. Then we're going to have a sum of the sale price as other revenue, and then we're going to have sale price minus cost, and we're going to do some of this as well as other margin. Okay, then I'm just going to do where other status is equal to complete. Yeah, because we only want to look at completed orders. Of course, we don't want to look at orders that are still being processed, because there's a chance that it could be returned, and then we're going to be calculating the revenue for orders that have been returned. So we're going to be focusing on only orders that are complete. And then we're going to do a group by order ID and user ID. Okay, so let's just look at what we've done here. We have staging model here selected as the other items, and then here we selected our product staging model, and then here we have selecting the other ID, user ID. I think we're cool, so I could just preview this to see what we've done. Let me take this up a bit. Okay, cool. This is perfect. Something I want to do is probably round this to 4 decimal places. So I think I should just do it for the both of them as well. Oops, there is an error here. It's gonna fail. Yeah, this is, yeah. So preview. Perfect. I'm going to save. So we've created our first intermediate model, and then we're going to create the next one. The next one we're going to create is other items enriched. So we know that our other items in the other tables, or other items table rather, it contains other the others, but it doesn't have as much details. So what I want to do is use other tables to enrich it such that we're going to have way more than just this. We're going to have the actual product and some other details, say maybe the country and all of that. So I'm just going to quickly create a new folder here in our intermediate directory, and I'm going to call it int enriched. Cool. All right, so we'll start fleshing this out as well. So we're going to be referencing this. Need to copy it. And then I'm going to also select products. Okay, so we can now flesh out our model, select SRX from, so we're going to get all of them, other items, say OI, left join. So I'm just gonna, for readability, I'm just going to this left join staging users on. Okay, we're going to be doing that. So we're going to be joining on the OI that products ID is equal to P that products ID. Yep, cool. Okay, then we are going to be fleshing out all the items that we want to have in this intermediate model. All right. So just before I do that, I think I'll just want to preview and see that our joins are fine. Okay, cool. Now we have that. I'm just going to copy this to save time. Okay, I'm going to do, this is going to be SB. This is going to be SB. Okay, so we have OI, yep, and then we have SU, and then we have SB. Okay, I'm just going to preview this one more time and then save. All right, and then we're going to create our last intermediate model, which is going to be for users. So I'm just going to quickly create, go here and create a file. We're going to call this int users history .sql. Perfect. Okay. So this basically it's going to be one where we just have like the users purchases, their first seen, their last seen, total count of orders they've had till date, the revenues that they've brought to the organization. So let's quickly do that. I'm going to, so I'm just going to copy this as a base so that I can move quickly. I'm going to copy this as a base. No, I don't need all of that. Okay, but what I need here is staging users. I think I need the users. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think that's fine actually. Because I already have like a user table. Okay, I'm going to just flesh this out. From other items. Our other items as OI. We're going to left join products on OI dot product ID is equal to, I'm just going to call my products as P dot product ID. And for this, I want to also check for only where our other status is equal to complete. Cool. Okay, so let's flesh out what we need. For this, I think one of the things I want to have is definitely user ID. And then we're going to get their first seen date, their last seen date, the number of orders they have till date. So let's see their mean created at as first seen. Then we're going to have their max created at as last seen. Now this particular model is really important if you want to create other metrics that are going to be user dependent, or the granularity has to do with users. And that's one of the beauty of modularity, because when you create individual chunks like this, they can be used to form a building blocks for other business logics that could come up in the future. And then we're going to count other ID as other still date, and then we're going to have the sale price. We're going to sum that up as total revenue. Okay, cool. So I just want to say, and we're going to group by user ID. Okay, so we have the user ID, we have the main created, that is when the order was created, or and then we're going to take it as their first thing. And then we have the max created out, which we're going to use as the last thing. Then we have the orders count and the sale price. Cool. Let's preview this quickly. Perfect. And I am just going to save. Perfect. We need to create a YAML file that is going to form the basis of explaining these models that we've created. Perhaps there's any business logic whatsoever that we've created and we think, okay, we would want to document this. Our YAML file is the best place to, include that documentation. So I'm going to do int. So create a new file, and I'm going to say underscore int YAML. So this is going to be our YAML file for our intermediate models. Then I'm just going to use this staging model YAML file as a base to get started. I'm just going to copy it up to here. I just need that for a base. Okay, so let's flesh out our models now. So we're going to now flesh out all the models one after the other, and then while I flesh them out, I'm now going to also include tests to be able to test this model. Is really important. Okay, so I'm just going to get started. Copy name. This is our model name, and then I'm going to include a description for it that says enriched other items dataset combining users, products, and other items. Cool. Okay, and then some of the columns we have there, we have user ID, and then for the user ID, I could include a description that says, okay, the user ID is the primary key, and yeah, test. One important test now that I want to also include in this user ID is relationship test. I want to include a test that ensures that the user ID has a foreign key in the users table that it is referencing. So to do that, I'm just going to enter, and then I'm going to type relationships. So if I type relationships here, it's going to show up. Yeah, so basically this is how you reference, or this is how you test your primary keys if you want to test for relationships as well. So now the reference here is going to be telling you which field is it going to be referencing, or sorry, which model is it going to reference, and the field here is what field in the new model is it going to be referencing. So here I want you to simply reference the staging model. So I'm just going to copy the name here, and then here is going to reference user ID. Perfect. Okay, I want to copy this as a base just to get more. I'm going to enter. Perfect. So I'm going to take this off. We don't need that. And then our next model that we need to test is test this one. Copy name. And then this is, now don't forget that this is on the granularity for this is on the other level. So I'm just going to say other level aggregated metrics. Okay. Then for this, I'm going to be using the other ID because the other ID is the lowest granularity we have there. The other ID is also the primary key. So I'm just going to leave a not null and unique test. And I'm not going to be testing for relationship in this one. Perfect. And then finally, I want to include the last model, which is our user's history. So backspace. So it's really important to remember that DBT DBT YAML files is based on hierarchy. So once there is a mistake here, I'm going to do a step backwards and then forward and then forward. Yeah, it's cool now. Okay, I'm just gonna copy it. This is where it should be. Then what would I want to test here? So I'm going to put user ID, and I think I'm just going to leave the same test, basically unique, not null. Well, I don't think I need to test this here, but I think I'm just going to take off the test. It's completely fine. Okay, so we have our models, we have the other enriched. So let me just say that I copied them all correctly. So we have the other items enriched. Okay, we have the others aggregated, and then we have the user history into user's history. Cool. So I think this is good to go. I'm just going to save. And then while I save that, we are going to go straight to we are going to start building our, okay, yes, before we move forward, something that I would like to do is to I would love to create a single test, right? So we already implemented, so let's go back to our YAML files. This is our YAML files, right? Yeah, so for our YAML files here, you can see that we've implemented a lot of tests for some of the fields we have in the new models that I've created. But something that would be really lovely to see is implementing a singular test that is going to test out a business logic for us. Now, singular test basically they're used to test business logic. This is something I explained earlier, and I'm going to create one and explain how we can also run those. So let's quickly create one. Let's go to our test. So if you want to create a singular test, how you do that is you go to your test and then you basically create an SQL script. So I'm going to go to our test here and I'm going to create a new file. And the new file, I'm going to call it other revenue non-negatives.sql because it's going to be an SQL script. And what we basically want to do is we want to reference this aggregated we want to reference this aggregated model, and then we want to see that we do not have any revenue that is less than 0. That's basically what we want to do. We want to see that there is no revenue here that is less than 0. So let's go back to our test. So I'm going to do select all from reference. We want to reference this model here, copy name, and then we want to do where other revenue is less than 0. Now, something you should know about test is that your test is going to fail, or your test fails when this query returns a result. Basically, your test is not supposed to return a result. That is the whole purpose of it. But when it returns a result, it means that this logic is not passing, hence that is why it is failing. So I'm just going to save this. So I have not built this model out. So let's start with building the models and then we're going to run this test. So let's build all our models. Okay, so we're going to do dbt build select, and we're going to select this model. This is enriched. Perfect. We have our model failing, so we want to investigate why our model is failing. Okay, so basically it's failing because of the unique identifier. So I'm just going to go back to my YAML. Where is my YAML file? Unique enriched. Which of them is failing? I'm going to save. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to build. Cool. So now we have run our DBT, the first intermediate model we created, and it's passed. So I'm just going to do the same for all of them. Then we can be able to run our test as well. So this is me building our aggregate. Perfect. And then finally, we are going to build the last model. Perfect. Now, recall that I mentioned that when you do DBT build, it runs your models and tests and implements all the quality checks that you have put in. But something that did not happen is that this test that we have created here was not implemented, or it was not tested. Now, there are so many ways you can test this model right now. You can do like a DBT test, select test type, and then you put your singular, which is the type of the test, or you can select specifically this test and run it against your model. Or you can create this test that we've created here. You can be able to create it as a macro, and then you can be able to also reference it here in your YAML file. So if you create that test as a macro, you can reference it here as well. But let's just quickly run this test. So to run this test, what we're going to do is we're going to do dbt test, and we're going to do select, and we are going to select this right here. So copy name, and we're going to run it. Perfect. So we have successfully run our tests. All right, moving on, we are going to quickly create our marts directory, and then we're going to round up this demo. So create new folder, which we're going to call marts. I'm going to call it short form here, marts. Okay. Now our marts directory is going to contain our dimensions table, is going to contain our facts table. Now I have two dimensions table that I would like to create for this demo. The first one is dim customers. So dimensions are short tables, which each rows it could be a person, a place, a name of a thing, and then your facts table generally represents transactions that probably like real world transactions. For example, in my case, we have others. So in my facts table, each record is going to represent an order record basically. So to create that, we're going to create smart, which we've already done, and then now we're going to create models. So to get started, the first one I'm going to create is the dim users. So I'm just going to create a new file here, new file, and I'm going to call it dim users.sql. So I would like to rename this users, rename users. Perfect. Okay, And then we are going to quickly reference our staging users table. So with we're going to reference this. So our staging model, this is our users. So I'm just going to copy this. And then we're going to have user history as and then we are going to reference the intermediate model that we created. So intermediate model, this is it here. Copy name. Perfect. And then we're just going to flesh everything out. So we're going to have from staging users, that is our SU. We're going to have a left join to user history as user history. Now join on SU dot user ID is equal to user history dot user ID as well. Okay, cool. And then we're going to just do our SU dot user ID. We're going to have our first name, last name, email, age, gender, city, country, traffic source, that is the acquisition source if you recall. Their first scene, which is important to us, their last scene, Then we also want to get their others till date. We need to confirm that that is what it was called in that place. Then we have total revenue. So let's just confirm that this is what we have. This is what we have named those columns. So let's see, total revenue, user history, actually, that's how we can find those names. So we have total revenue, order till date, last seen, first seen. Perfect. Okay, I would love to preview this to be sure that we have everything written out. Okay, perfect. We have an error. We just need to find out where we are having the error or what could be the cause. So let's see all the way down. We have unrecognized name. So we have unrecognized. So we have first name. This is first seen, you know. Yeah, this is first seen. This is first name, last name, email, age, gender. We should also have state since we have city. State. We have country, traffic source, their first seen, their last seen, order till date, and total revenue. So let's review this again. Let's confirm. It says unrecognized name as 31.30. Just need to be sure that we have everything. So we have SU. Oh yeah, this is SU. This is SU and this is UH. This is UH. Yeah. Alright, let's preview. Perfect. And perfect. Let's just quickly create our next model, which is going to be dim products. So new file. I'm going to call it dim products because it is a dimensions table. And for our dim product, we're going to reference our staging products table, and then we're just going to get this. So let's just quickly create that. Select asterisk from ref underscore ref, and then we're going to be referencing this right here. Copy name. Now, it's really important to also know that it's not compulsory to actually have intermediate tables. It's just necessary if instead of having a huge chunk of code in your maths table, in your maths models rather, it's better that you have intermediate tables that you could now reference in your math, but it's not compulsory that you must have intermediate tables. All right, so let's quickly just flesh this out. And then this is now going to be products. And what do we want to have in our products? So we want to have our product ID. We want to have the product name, which it was ID before, and we renamed it to product name. Just gonna type this name. Then we're going to have brand. We're going to have category. We are going to have department. Retail price. Okay, I'm going to preview. Yeah, perfect. And one last thing to create now is a final fat others table, which is now going to be just like I explained. It's going to contain individual transactions, like daily processes or daily other transactions. So let's quickly create that. Fat. I'm going to call it fat others. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is reference our aggregate model with other aggregate. I'm going to say select, and then we're going to reference our intermediate model. Okay. And then we are also going to reference the other details, that is the other enriched. We're going to have select. We're now going to reference this model right here. Copy name. From other aggregate. It's gonna which I'm going to call other aggregate. And we are going to inner join this time around. We are going to inner join to other details on OA. So my other details, I'm going to call it OD. So on OA, dot order ID. We got od.id. Perfect. Okay, and we're just going to flesh this out. Okay, so let's just confirm we have everything. Order ID, user ID, created at, order count. Yeah, this is perfect. I'm going to preview. And I'm going to save. And then I am going to quickly create a YAML file to be able to document all the models we have in our marts directory. So quickly create that new file, and I'm going to call it underscore marts. Don't forget that when you have like an underscore before you name it, it's going to help your YAML file to stay on top, so that once you open your directory, you can always just find your YAML file as the first file. Cool. So I'm just going to copy this as a base as well to create our YAML file. Just copy this as a base. So let's go to our YAML file here. So let's copy this. And this is going to be our dimensions table, our product. Okay, and then I'm going to have dim users, and we're going to have description, and it's going to be dimensions table for users. And then finally, I'm going to just create one more thing, which is going to be for our fat others. Copy. Description. And I'm going to say this is our fats table, fats others table. And I am going to save. So we have team products, team users, fats others. Save this. Okay, cool. I think the last thing to do now would be to run our models. That is the last two models we created. I think we have materialized all models. Something I'm seeing that is really interesting here is our models diagram that basically shows all the lineages. You can see a fat table. You could see all the lineages, all the upstream models that fits into it, and then you can see about dim users, all the upstream models that fits to it. And this is really interesting. So I'm just going to quickly build the last models that we created, and yeah, so let's just go here, and I'm going to build this. Perfect. Done building. I'm going to build our users table as well. And then finally, we're going to build our others table. Perfect. So we have come to the end of this demo. I really hope that I was able to teach you and walk you through how to build your DBT project right from the beginning to the end. The next series, I'm going to give a more advanced approach to some of the things we did, like if we have to build macros for to test some of our models or our business logic. So just stay tuned, and thank you so much for joining. Bye.